Hej og velkommen til Mølle med mig, Anders Olsen, og med
Niels Kristian. Anders, nu var du jo med sidste gang, da jeg sad på Fanø, og du sad derhjemme. Nu sidder vi begge to i vores respektive normale studier, vores hjem.
Det er fantastisk.
Det er da ikke så dumt.
Nej, det er skønt, og det er altså 2 episoder, jeg er med i træk nu. Det er jo helt vildt.
Jamen, det er så dejligt.
Men vi nærmer os... Vi nærmer os jo 2 måneder. Vi nærmer os 2 måneder med alt det her sygdomsskravl og ynk. Og jeg synes ikke, jeg er helt på toppen endnu, men formen var god i dag.
Nej, så det er også sådan en lille disclaimer, at hvis du på et tidspunkt lige, hvad skal man sige, forlader os lidt, så er det fordi, du lige har brug for lige at trække vejret et øjeblik.
Lige præcis.
Ja, men, og nu det lyder forkert, når jeg siger forlader os, men hvis du lige holder en pause i nogle minutter, så er det fordi, at det gør ondt eller et eller andet, ikke?
Ja, vi fastholder alt, hvor godartet de fjernede det, de skulle. Jeg forlader ikke nu.
Ja, nej, det er virkelig dejligt at høre. Men jeg formoder også, at jeg behøver ikke at spørge, om du har lavet noget ølrelateret siden sidst.
Jeg tror faktisk dårligt nok, jeg har drukket en øl siden sidst.
Ja, men det er jo også okay, når man er i, hvad skal man sige, den tilstand, du er i.
Det håber jeg da, at der ikke er tvang der.
Ja, det er der ikke. Jeg har også taget det lidt roligt, fordi jeg så godt sige, at jeg fik min del øl på Fanø. Ikke kun til Fanø Strong Beer Festival, men jeg var jo på Fanø en hel uge, og jeg så godt sige, at jeg havde taget et lille lager med og nød det alle dagene op til, og så var Søren og alle de var der jo fredag aften også, hvor vi også fik gået til de gode sager. Ikke blæst, men mange andre gode sager.
Jamen det må vi finde ud af, hvad vi gør ved den sidste blæst, vi har, eller vi skulle have delt.
Ja. Vi finder nok en anden lejlighed.
Må ikke?
Må ikke, vi gør.
Men jeg går ud fra, at det var et dejligt arrangement, som det plejer at være.
Ja, men det var... jeg tror, at jeg godt forstår, hvorfor at Strong Beer Festival blev kort til årets festival på Beer Blog Awards, fordi det er virkelig bare en fantastisk dejlig festival at være til. Altså, det er sådan den der stemning, der er der af, at der bare er masser af god stemning, og man får sådan lidt oplevelsen af, at det er lige lidt ekstra hyggeligt. Og jeg ved ikke, om det er det der med, at det også er en ø. Jeg ved godt, at Elstar kun ligger 12 minutter væk med færgen og sådan noget, men det kan bare et eller andet med, at man er på en ø, og det er et bryghus, der ligesom danner rammen, at det ikke er undskyld, men det er ikke en eller anden stor hal, en sportshal, en eller anden messehal eller sådan noget. Det er simpelthen et bryghus, der lægger hus til det.
Jamen det tror jeg er helt rigtigt, men det er jo, vi har talt om det før, jeg tror også, vi har i det her format, men i hvert fald har vi to det der med at også bare tage en sommerferie på Fanø, det er næsten som at komme til sådan et eller andet land på en eller anden måde, fordi der er det vand hele vejen rundt om, og så er Fanø Bryghus jo bare drønhyggeligt. Jeg har jo ikke prøvet de nye rammer, men...
Nej, og som jeg sagde i sidste afsnit, så prøvede jeg jo også det helt nye, at de har lavet øl på dåser.
Ja, jamen det er jo helt... Ja. Men det er den vej, det går for de fleste.
Ja, og Anders, så fik jeg jo smagt noget, som jeg faktisk er lidt ked af, at du ikke var med til, men der var jo sådan nogle klokkeslets skænkninger af forskellige øl, og en af dem, det var jo de her 2 24 måneders fadlagringer af Wedding, den sorte og den hvide. Men det, der var lidt sjovt, det var, at Teddy, han stod der selv, dengang vi har snakket med, mens vi ventede på, at der blev talt ned og sådan noget. Og så siger Teddy til, jeg får en red wedding, og vi smager også. Min kone, hun fik en black wedding, så vi kunne smage dem. Og så siger Teddy, I have this secret barrel. Og så havde han over bagved, der havde han sådan et gravity på fad. Sådan rigtig engelsk metalfad godt nok. Men så siger han, at vi skal smage den her øl. Det er grundøllen til vores weddingøl. Kan du huske, vi snakkede med Steve om det?
Ja.
Den var faktisk ikke så dum. Den smagte faktisk ganske udmærket, selvom Steve sagde, at det ikke nødvendigvis var sådan, at en grundøl til en fadlagret øl, den var fantastisk god, men det smagte faktisk rigtig godt, og det var enormt interessant at prøve grundøl til det, som ikke var fadlagret.
Ja, undskyld, der var et eller andet, der bimlede og bamlede herinde, det skal jeg lige slå for.
det skal nok gå.
Jeg havde ellers slået forstyr ikke på, men det var den godt nok ligeglad med.
Ja, men ved du hvad, det kan ske for os alle sammen. Det er det klassiske skolelærertrik. Jeg bliver jo desperat og sidder og kigger på min telefon og tænker, har jeg slået det hele frem? Det har jeg. Men det var sådan en oplevelse med det der med, at så smagte man den der ikke fadlagrede øl, og så lige bagefter, så fik vi den sorte og den hvide i 24 måneder. De er gode.
Jeg har dem stående jo, ved jeg. Jeg har købt min shop, du kender.
Ja, og de blev også hurtigt langt over disken. Men jeg vil sige, nu de var lidt for kolde, da vi fik dem, men min oplevelse af dem, da vi fik dem der, det var, at den sorte, det var den bedste.
Ja, det vil jeg glæde mig til at prøve på et eller andet tidspunkt. Jeg har jo smagt baseølen for nylig, men det var i den her Harvesters engagement-udgave, som er lavet med Menu Sølvlav, men det er jo wedding-basen i hvert fald. Ja, men på de fade, Menu har brugt.
Ja, først til at sige, at det her, den base, jeg fik, det var bagesøn. Der var ikke nogen fade i.
Ja, præcis.
Så, ja. Nå, Anders, vi kunne jo snakke længere om alt det her med siden sidst, men summa summarum er, at Fanø Strong Beer Festival være også næste år, altså til alle dem, der ikke har været der, det er sindssygt hyggeligt. Og jeg vil næsten ikke fremhæve nogen bryggerier, fordi de var bare alle sammen skide gode, og det er mega hyggeligt. Men altså, der var jo flere, jeg var forbi flere gange. Vi startede med at gå hen til Patrick og Placentia Street, og på vejen, der kom vi faktisk forbi Bicycle Brewing. Og dem synes jeg jo, vi skal vende tilbage til.
Jamen skal vi ikke det? Fordi du har jo lavet en lille aftale, nu du var derovre.
Ja, så vi cykler lige rundt, og så cykler vi lige tilbage igen, og så siger vi, så slår vi over på vores bedste skolelærer engelsk, og så siger jeg, welcome Alex, Bicycle Brewing.
Super, thanks guys.
Jamen, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Alex, before we talk about bicycle brewing or beers or cider or anything, who are you?
Personally or the brewery?
Yeah,
or both?
Yeah. Both.
So I'm Alex, and I'm originally from San Francisco, but I've been now in Denmark or in Copenhagen for quite a long time. My wife Christina is from Copenhagen and is Danish, and that's the sort of short story about how we ended up here. I've done a lot of different things over the course of my life or my career, but I ended up here and ended up making beer, and that's what I'm doing now for professionally more than 8 years with Bicycle, both beer and cider, and we also have a 8-year-old son, Henry. So it's Christina, Henry, and I, and we live in the neighborhood here, Østerbo, where the brewery is located. Henry goes to school here. This whole thing is kind of like combination of lifestyle and business, and it's nice.
Yeah, I think maybe before we talk anymore, it's a beer podcast. We need to have something in the glass to drink.
That we do.
Yeah, and you handed me 2 bottles, or actually 4 bottles, but 2 of each at Fanø when we made this arrangement. And one is a cider, and the other one is a beer. And I guess we're starting with the cider.
I think that makes sense. Yes, the cider is definitely the lighter of the two, and that's a good logic, right? But what's fun about this? So I'll just give you a few words about it. But it's Elstar, and that's the main apple variety that's used in the cider, and it's the first one, the first cider we've had from the 2025 harvest. So I guess we released it, I don't know, about a month ago first, but it's brand new basically, super fresh, fruity, crisp, really nice kind of apple, true to kind of fruit apple ness to it. So, but I'll let you guys take it from there. Yeah, should we open?
Yeah, I think so.
Not sure how much sound came through. It was really it was like. Would fizzy be the right word here? I poured quite aggressively, so.
I heard I thought it had a nice sound to it, but
cool.
But I heard something. We'll see if it comes through in the final, right?
It smells nice.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
Yes.
I was just doing the pictures. I have to.
Need to do the so me thing.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, and I have to do number 2.
You have to do number 2.
Yeah, the second sip. Sorry. Sorry. It's really. It wasn't when I had the smell when I opened it and poured it, and then I tasted it. It was 2 different things because it was so. Not 2 different bad things, 2 different good things. It was very fruity and maybe sweet from the apples in the smell. And then I had the sip, and it was much more dry. Actually, what I like in a cider is this very dry feeling. And I think it's very nicely dry and still crisp. And actually, some kind of sweetness is now. I think there's a sweetness in my mouth now that I actually really like. And also, apple skin or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like I get the sweetness, I get the crisp light acidity, but then and now I'm just guessing. I know nothing about cider making or anything, but it's like a bit of bitterness from the skins.
Yeah, with this, yes. What we do with a lot of our ciders, right, is we try to make kind of fresh, fruity ciders, and obviously working with apples, you get a few different dimensions at play, right? You get kind of aromatic, kind of appleness. You can sometimes get bitterness from certain kinds of like cider apples, right? You can sometimes, and then you can get like tannic and acidity. Yeah. So these are the kinds of things you're trying to balance. And what this is, it's primarily Elstar. That's maybe an apple you guys know. It's in the people know this one, right? Yeah. But it's blended with two other apple varieties, right? To get the more complex flavor profile you're kind of talking about, right? There are actually also cider apples and an apple called Topaz, which you may also know. That's a culinary apple too. Yeah. And that's what we do with most of our ciders. We like to kind of make a lot of, I guess, single variety or almost single variety like this, where it highlights the sort of main apple that we're calling the cider. But like I say, to build a more complex cider, sometimes a single apple is not enough. And Elstar is one example of that. It's actually a pretty like delicate, I guess, apple, right? So it has a very light flavor, if you will, right? Yeah. So to get a more sort of intense, sort of complex flavor, that requires the blending. But the ciders are really fun for us, and it's something that we've been doing, for a little while. Not as long as brewing, but it's also something we've expanded lately. So and we're hoping to, keep up with.
Okay, so let's put the cider aside for a minute, and then maybe an odd question when we're talking about cider, but how did you get into the world of beer?
So that was the first step in this whole journey for me, anyways, right? And cider comes much later, but for me, the very beginning of the story was, I guess, 7 years ago. I graduated from university in the U.S. in 1999. Yeah, and I had my first job out of college. I was actually at a PR agency, but I was sitting and I was surfing on the internet, which is what you do at work, right? But of course, there wasn't that much on the internet at that time. But I did find a home brewing kit, or I stumbled upon it. I don't really remember how, and I thought, holy shit, you can make beer at home. I mean, I had no idea that was I guess I didn't really think about it, right? But I didn't know that was possible. But so the plastic bucket and comes in the mail, and I've got the pot in my kitchen in San Francisco, and made the first batch was like a pretty mediocre beer. Like, it was okay. We drank it, right? Yeah, but it wasn't amazing at all. But you know what I did? I kept at it, and it brought in some friends into sort of the hobby, like a lot of homebrewers do, right? It was about like a social thing, drinking beer, making beer. I had a couple of good friends that were really interested in it too, and kind of increasingly got more sophisticated. Then the story goes on and on, for like 20-something years, and ends up here. But that's basically how I got started. And how lucky I don't know, I stumbled upon that. That's
what was the first beer? Do you remember?
Yeah, you know what it was? It was like kind of a clone of an amber. It was an ale, not a lager, but a Dos Equis amber. Yeah. Do you know the Mexican beer? Yeah. But we made it. The kit we made it was a kit of a beer, right? But we made it as it was an ale yeast, not a lager yeast, because we definitely weren't sophisticated enough to like control temperature at that stage. And then from there, from after that one, then I moved on to some basically going into like the pale ale, kind of inspired by Sierra Nevada, like beers that were sort of just popular or had been popular for a little while then in the US, right? But were sort of had begun to redefine what pale ales, IPAs could be, right?
Yeah. I guess that's how we all, you could say, fell in the pot, because I also started homebrewing before I went into selling beers and writing about it and talking about it. And I know, Anders, you also have done way more homebrewing than me.
I remember exactly my first one. It was like a small black book. I can't remember the author's name, but it was Mikkel from Mikella who developed an IPA recipe for the book, and then he shared some homebrew versions of some of his commercial beers.
Awesome. How did that one turn out?
It turned out okay, but of course I had to dry hop it because I heard of dry hopping, and And I had this Northern Brewer hops I didn't know what to do with, so I dry hopped with Northern Brewer in my first beer.
Oh shit! All right, yeah,
Great decision.
Yeah,
but it worked, and it was fine, and it was drinkable, and I actually made this. Taste it.
Totally right. Well, also, I think, and that's been, I guess, all of our experiences, right? But I would also tell people when I tell the story, like when I give tours of the brewery and stuff, right? Is if you get into home brewing and you can follow instructions and keep things clean, then you can make a totally good beer, like a totally decent beer, and that is itself hugely rewarding, right? And then you can just get better from, you can only go up from there, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So that's cool.
I actually don't remember the first beers I brewed. It was like it was a homebrew course actually, where a shop in Silkeborg they had some courses, and we Hjemmebryggeren they did some courses, and we were there. It's like, oh shoot, it's 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago. So
yeah, fair enough. You don't remember that.
One of them was a Belgian. It was some kind of, I think it was a triple or something. Two different beers. So now we talked about hobby. Was it you going into brewing professionally? Was it a hobby running wild?
Yeah, basically, but in extremely, like, many tiny steps, I guess you could say, right? Because that's a long journey when I think back to how long ago it started. But yeah, a long period of just getting increasingly more sophisticated, making beers at home, and then meeting my wife, Christina, who we met in Amsterdam. So she was studying there. I was studying there in 2002. So I left my first job or second job in the U.S. and went back to study. Went to Amsterdam, met her. It turns out she was not a beer maker at the time, but she was a beer drinker. And so this was like a start of a good, and then I got her into the hobby, and she wasn't, which is always good, right? That's But she wasn't, and what was lucky for us, right, is she wasn't like she had former background, not as like a food scientist, but she was a laboratory scientist formerly. And so that brought this whole level of sort of, I guess, rigor to rigorousness, I guess, to the beer making process. And that's, I think, we started actually taking some steps up in like the quality and what we were controlling and what we were understanding. Not because I wasn't trying to do that earlier. I mean, I was, but I think she helped in a big way. Yeah, kind of take that step up, and so that was that. We did that together for a number of years. Now this is gonna be a long story, so stop me if it gets too long.
No. It's a great story.
But so we do this for a number of years, right? And then fast forward to, I guess, 2015, and at that stage we had both worked, I don't know, maybe like 15 plus years in different careers, and not that we were like having some kind of crazy crisis, but I think we looked at our lives or whatever, and we looked at things and we thought, okay, we saved some money. We didn't really know we were super happy in our jobs or our careers, and we said, okay, let's try something totally different. So we quit and we traveled for a year, around the world, and that was awesome. We did tons of amazing things, but one of the things we did was pursue this interest. So we visited breweries all over the world. We did a blog online as we did this, but I think we visited 45 different breweries all around Europe, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, North, Central, South America, and we saw all these different ways that people had done stuff like this. We found like modern brew pubs, breweries all over the place, and that was yes, super inspiring, right? Just seeing the ways this had been done, and there were some lucky coincidences involved. At one stage, shortly after getting back, the location where we currently have the brewery or the brew pub became available. So we took that over then when we got back, and then this slowly started becoming a reality. It was still like a side project for a couple of years. So when we came back, we actually went back to the well-paying jobs, which is also important, or the better paying jobs, I should say, and then built up the brewery kind of on the side, and then finally in 2018 opened to the public. So that was the longest story, but yeah.
But a great story. So Denmark, was that because of love, or just because Denmark was the place to go for craft beer?
Yeah, that too, definitely. But it was we had being an international couple, we were lucky enough to have the opportunity to live both places. So I first came here to Copenhagen with Christina, and then we moved back to San Francisco. That was in 2003, and then 2003, and then we went back to San Francisco in 2006, and then we came back here in 2010. So we've been both places, but yes, the answer to why Denmark or why Copenhagen is her and her family at the time, her mother that was here. So that was the main reason, and then But then I was lucky enough to see the evolution of craft beer, I think, like in Denmark, because I saw it actually, growing up on the West Coast of the U.S., I sort of saw it there, and then saw an entire transformation from when I first came here in 2003 till today. I mean, that's mad, right?
So watching both the American and the Danish craft beer revolution, do you think that has given you some kind of an edge compared to other brewers in Denmark?
I don't know. I think, I had, I've had a lot of exposure to, I guess, a lot of things in the U.S. And I think a lot of us have now, because we get beers imported here, right? But I guess especially coming, I guess, starting to drink beer in like 1999 and things, that's a couple decades, I guess, after some of these really landmark beers were getting made or created in the U.S., right? But I think it was pretty interesting to like sort of live through that there a little bit and see the evolution of the West Coast IPA, right, on the West Coast of the U.S., right, and then come here. So I don't know. It's nice to have both perspectives. One thing I think about the Danish brewing scene, though, is I think we're immensely lucky. I think as beer drinkers, not just as beer makers, but I think it's a very there's a very good, a very high level here, right? There's a lot of really good breweries, and I think a lot of really good beer getting made. So I think on the one hand, maybe when I first saw the revolution taking hold here, I feel like it was a little bit at the time taking some flavors and beer styles kind of from the U.S., right, and then bringing them here and maybe modifying them a little bit. But it was largely that. But I think now, Danish breweries have their own. You know what I mean? Danish brewing is its own thing. It is running with a bunch of styles in some interesting ways. Stuff like that.
It's actually quite fun that you say that. We mentioned Teddy from Fanø earlier. And last year at Fanø, we talked. I actually think we talked to Graham, and then Teddy came and tagged along for an interview. And he talked about what did he call it, Niels Kristian? The Danish Pale Ale.
Copenhagen Pale Ale.
Copenhagen Pale Ale. He said, you have taken something we know in all of the world and made kind of your own thing. Embrace it instead of hunting the American whales or whatever it is. Something like that. I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's something like that.
Totally. I think I heard him use that expression too. So I was there. I was at Fanø for the full week too, and I brewed with them on Tuesday. So hung out with Teddy then as well. And I swear I remember him using that. We didn't get into a deep conversation about it, but I remember using that expression actually. Yeah. So totally, I caught that too. Yeah.
But do you think there's something about it? Do we have like a Copenhagen Pale Ale? You perhaps scratch the surface a bit, but
yeah, maybe. Well, I think there's a couple styles that obviously a lot of breweries do a lot. I think pale ales. I think hazy IPAs, and I do think like countries or regions evolve sort of their own take on it. Like I certainly think like hazy IPAs coming out of Copenhagen are different than ones coming from the good breweries in Sweden. Like I think there's different. There's like sort of stylistic differences, probably just partly because what the market. Or like the drinkers here maybe either lean, I don't know, a little more towards sweetness or dryness or bitterness or what do I know, right? But these kinds of things I think cause things to evolve. But I think local breweries leaning into that, right, is a cool thing versus like you said earlier, maybe Teddy was saying, rather than trying to recreate something that was from someplace else, doing it to the local taste where you're getting feedback from people here, and that's what's so cool for us, being basically almost entirely a brew pub, right? So most people drink most of our beer, 2 or 3 meters away from us. So we hear exactly what they think about it, and that's a huge way to change what you're doing or modify what you're doing based on what people are saying and stuff like that.
I guess we have to say cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Skål.
Skål.
It really is a nice cider.
Yeah, it's. We talk a lot about drinkability, and this is really, even though it's really dry and crisp, it's so drinkable. Or not even though, because of.
Well, I think soon, hopefully, we're getting to cider season. I could see the sun. I don't know for where you guys are, but the sun was shining in Copenhagen today, and it was decently warm. So I can feel I can feel the weather coming that matches this kind of cider too, right?
Yeah. I think it was 14 degrees or something when I walked the door this afternoon. So yeah.
It was perfect cider weather today. When I was going home from work, it was on my bike. It was no gloves today. That was the first time since on this side of winter. So
impressive. Yeah. It's nice. I can.
I had a question. Yeah. I know this is not beer, but this is you talked about people going into your brew pub. But is there a certain philosophy behind the things you do at Bicycle Brewing?
Well, I think all the things we do, and partly, I guess, because one, we're too small. Too small. Sorry, that was the wrong way to say that. Because we're so small. Too small is not the right word. I think small is good. So don't misunderstand me. But I think because we're so small, I mean, that drives a lot of kind of what we do just in a natural way. So I think the philosophy that kind of is behind all the beers we make and the ciders we make too is like really just wanting to make the best things we can. And that sounds pretty obvious. Of course, most breweries want to do that too. But I guess what I mean is when we're so small, like we really take that seriously in the sense that like there is no limit on what we spend to put in a beer. Like the goal is to make the best possible thing. And regardless of what anything costs, we've had some examples of beers where single ingredients just cost astronomical sums, you know what I mean? And the hope is just that we can sell it in the tap room for like basically enough to justify that, right? So we don't think about costs. We also don't like leave things well enough alone, if you know what I mean. We do in a kind of a really small scale. I mean, we're constantly adjusting things. A lot of things can still be adjusted after sort of the brewing phase, but like during fermentation and later phases, especially when we're using new ingredients or using things like coffee or cacao nibs or other kinds of things. We use more if we need more. We take we're sampling things quite often and tweaking and adjusting things. And I think that kind of like iterative or like step by step process and the focus on just doing the best thing we possibly can is a kind of driving philosophy, and I think hopefully translates into what ends up in the glass.
How big or small is a batch of beer?
Good question. Yeah, so 200 liters is the sort of average size. We can squeeze 220, maybe in the fermentation tanks, and we can also. But on the other hand, if we make some of the big beers we make, one of which we'll try later, then typically with longer boil times or stronger beers or double, triple mashes that we typically have to do to get beers at that level, then maybe we end up with 140 or something like this. So we're ending with like precious drops, I suppose, at some level. I mean, we're not the smallest brewery, but we're probably we're the size of a bigger brewery's test brewery, I guess you could, or pilot brewery, if you could say, right?
Yeah. That explains because I tried to get some of your beers for Drinking Beer, but the Belgiske Hus, who distributes your beers, it was sold out before I even ended up pressing order. So
it is. I mean, these are pretty limited. A lot of them are pretty limited releases, but we are happy to be working with them because then at least it gets some of our beers and the ciders. They're also distributing the ciders for us. It gets them to more places, which is kind of fun for us too to see them. Yeah.
How often do you brew beers?
So typically, maybe 4 or 5 times a month. But not typically not maybe like 2-3 times a week, and then so 1 week maybe we brew 2 or 3 times, and the next week we typically do like packaging or things like this, like cellaring work of other kinds, and then kind of switch back. And then cider also ends up in the mix somewhere too. We're basically we have 5 fermentation tanks in the brewery, and so they're always full to the extent we can keep them always full. So we're basically running it just almost 100% capacity all the time, and that's just to supply the 2 little bars we have, and occasionally sell some few bottles here and there, right?
So do you have room for expansion, more tanks, or if that's necessary at some time?
Unfortunately, or for better or for worse, no. And in fact, one day I'll have to, you guys will have to join me in the brewery so I can show you. But basically, the way that the space is fairly small. So the brew pub is entirely maybe 70 something square meters, and the brewery takes up, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 square meters of that. But it's like everything. It's something I'm kind of proud of, right? But everything is so perfectly fit together that there is like literally a centimeter between every piece of equipment. And there's actually places where certain things, when we're using the brewery, there's like certain pieces of equipment that have to come onto the, come down onto the floor. And there is like millimeters of clearance for things to like fit, So unfortunately, no. On the brewing side, no. So we have no obvious way to expand there. But on the cider side, we have we made cider originally in the brewery, and then we outgrew that. We opened a second bar where we made cider, and then we eventually got a back house to that bar, like a production space behind the other bar that was even bigger, and we're producing cider there. And now we're also producing cider on the island of Thank you. In an even bigger quantity. So that turned out to be for us because of a partnership with a former employee of ours, or a current employee, but also a cider maker. So we're doing that with somebody else, and that solved the problem of how to scale and keep the quality we wanted on the cider side. On the beer side, we just haven't. That wasn't as easy to figure out. So I don't know. We had some different ideas, and we make a lot of collabs with bigger breweries. So there's certain, we could consider things like that maybe, but at this stage, I don't have a really good solution for how to make some our beers the quality I want them on a bigger scale. And like I said, like you asked, because I can't fit any more fermentation tanks in our brewery, we're kind of sticking where we are for now. Yeah.
You talked about doing the best possible beers. Is that from your personal flavor or from what the customers want, the commercial side of things?
I guess it's hopefully both, but that's sort of a cheat answer, right? But I think often it's to my own taste, and I think when you go, a lot of times I think with all the different good breweries around here, I think partly if you how should I say this? I think partly as a beer drinker, you're buying into the taste of the brewers at the brewery to some degree, right? Obviously, some breweries that have like core beers, I guess those are what they are. And brewers can change, and they still make those beers, sure. But in our case, and a lot of other small breweries, we make new things almost all the time. So really, if someone comes and likes our beer, to some degree, they are like buying into my taste a little bit. But that said, I think I have pretty decent taste, but I'm totally happy to listen to everybody. Like, I love when people tell us what they like about the beers, or even if what they don't like. I love things like Untapped, because I love what people say or see or rate, or how they rate beers. Like, these are all ways we get like huge amounts of feedback. And I actually think brewing is super lucky for that reason, because there's like lots of avenues to get feedback. Like there's a really engaged, audience and sort of community around craft beer, especially in this country, right? There's so many ways we can, hear about what we're doing.
Maybe I get bashed from the beer world now, but it's actually quite relieving to hear a brewer telling that he likes to follow his beers on Untapped, because almost all brewers, they say, "Oh, I do not look at Untapped," and I always I have the thought that you're telling me you're not looking at Untapped, but of course you're looking at what people are saying about your beers. You want to hear what they say.
Of course, right. Well, the way I look at it is, I've talked to other brewers about this too, right? And I think brewers have kind of a love-hate relationship sometimes with Untapped, I suppose. But the way I like to look at it is, imagine, I think any other industry would kill for the idea that there was this thing where like people were so actively interested in what they were drinking or eating or whatever, right? That they're like taking pictures of it and sharing it with their friends. Imagine if you had, I think anyone else would love to have that. So certainly as beer, it's hard to say, I think that obviously we can all probably agree that Untapped has some sort of, like any rating system, like has some bias, has some biases, like certain things get rated higher than others. And you can always talk about that, right? And those are limitations. But the fact that it's there and people are rating things and drinking things and taking pictures of beers, I don't know. I think that's cool.
Yeah, it is. It actually is quite cool. Maybe should we just have another sip and then turn to the beer?
Sure, totally. I'm just drinking away. Cheers, guys.
I do as well. It's real nice. So cheers. Skål.
Cheers. Yeah, I think cider. We weren't going into it too much, but maybe it's just an interesting observation, and maybe you guys know more. But like I've obviously been in Denmark for some time, but my sort of outside observation of the cider market here, right, is that it's funny with Denmark, because it seems like we grow lots of apples and have a long tradition of that, but just don't really have a very established like historical tradition for cider making. It's not to say there aren't like some little cideries sort of dotted around the country, but compared to, say, for example, like northern France or like Spain or even Sweden or Poland or the UK, it just hasn't been a huge thing here. So it's sort of interesting. It's probably interesting for us too to see if we can kind of break into that, or like introduce some people to something.
I think it's very interesting, because actually I think Bad Seed, they are in an old lemonade factory, a soda factory. But I also know from my wife, because she's from that area, that when she was a child, they picked apples and they drove to the brewery, and they turned in the apples, and then they had must, is it called that, juice in return?
It is also in English, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's what we drink in Denmark. Cider is not that much of a thing, but it's very good. But also because people, they drink, and I don't know if I want to say it, but Somersby and all those kinds of sweet things. And you mentioned the French version. I really like those super dry French versions.
Yeah, it's an interesting point with Somersby, though. I think that's my other observation, right? Is that was such a successful brand. So I agree with you, but it's such a successful brand for Carlsberg, right? I think there was this huge growth for them for a long time, right? And I think there are probably a lot of people that's the only, cider in quotation marks that they probably experience. And that is what it is, but I think that also makes it a little bit hard for the development of the cider market in Denmark, right? Because one, there wasn't a strong previous tradition, and now the mass market is dominated by this one drink that a lot of people recognize, but isn't so much what you might really call a traditional cider, right? Or
We actually did an episode, I think it's about a year ago or something, with Mikkeller. They did a cider with Somersby. I can't remember the name of it, but was it like...
I can't remember the name.
Forbidden Fruit, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we also had some English ciders as well.
We had some English ciders, and actually for my son's confirmation some years ago, I served Spanish ciders instead of champagne. When the guests arrived, they had Spanish cider instead. So
I think that's a great idea. We for a long time there's like this local villa in Østerbo that's run by the Kommune. So they use it for like shared workspace and also like cultural events and things like this, festivals of different kinds, et cetera, et cetera. And the catering company that works there, they're like kind of a gourmet catering company. They do events, and for a long time they have been buying our ciders for exactly that purpose. Is welcome drinks, and they were actually saying it's really nice because it's sort of it's similarly festive to a champagne, but not as high alcohol, right?
Exactly.
And when you're trying to manage the long day, right, of everyone kind of hanging out, then maybe it's okay to start with something that's like 6-7%. Yeah,
we actually started there because some of the guests, we knew they were drinking alcohol free, so we tested some different products to see what could be served for the non-alcohol adults, and it was actually really nice. And then we had like a small deli Spanish serving real tapas, not like the Danish cheese and whatever, but really the real stuff. He was married to a Spanish woman, and then we said, do you have a real or a cider with alcohol? And then he said, you should taste it. So just okay, let's go with that. Both the alcohol free and the one with alcohol because it made sense.
That sounds fun. That sounds really fun. Yeah.
I feel that the atmosphere in this podcast is changing now.
Sorry, I derailed us for a second there. Yeah.
Is it because of atmospheric things?
It might be, right?
That was really really nice. Not wax, but what do you call that?
I guess maybe foil, although it's plastic. But I was kind of inspired to do that. It's obviously what you normally might see on some wines, but
Exactly.
But I figure it's like almost elegant looking, similar to wax, but one, easier to put on, and two, easier to take off. So that's it.
As listeners know, I sometimes serve Amager Bryghus beers at festivals, and the old bottles, double black mash and all that stuff, the wax of death. I hate it when I serve the beers, but I agree, it looks exclusive and
it looks really nice. But those, they really are tough to get off sometimes, right? Okay, are we opening or?
We are.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess. Exactly.
I'm just pouring all over the place.
I poured all of it in the glass, and
yeah.
Good work.
Wow, nice aroma.
So this is Oh, go ahead.
I have to do the picture. But just say something, Alex. I'm just doing a picture while you talk.
Or else I'm going to say something. I get a lot of chocolatey and some barrel, and I haven't actually read what it is, but it's whiskey barrel aged.
That is correct, yeah, and that's spot on. Yeah, it's definitely a stout that leans into the chocolate, so using a lot of chocolate malts. But this was one. This is atmosférique. It's a barrel-aged Imperial stout, 14 months in a 2 whiskey barrel. But we released it at Fenu Strong Beer. Speaking of that, so we served it there, or we opened some bottles there, and now we have a bottle release here in Copenhagen on Friday for a limited number of bottles, and a few others will end up probably around the country. But yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Skål.
Skål.
Ej, vi er helt sikkert nødt til at have en slurk mere, selvom jeg har prøvet den før.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, because you had it at Fainer, yeah?
Yeah, and I actually, I didn't rate it on Untapped because we were going to talk about it in the podcast today. So I think, to be fair, I wouldn't influence Anders by rating it.
No. But it's really, really nice. It's yeah. Just as I was talking, something happened on my palate. It just opened up a bit more chocolatey, but also some. What's that? I guess it's licorice. Yeah, almost licoricey. And then the whiskey, and I see it was 2 whiskey. You said it too, but a bit of fruity. I can't just put my finger on what it is, but some kind of fruit.
There's also maybe even prunes or something.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it's so rich.
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
Almost, sorry, yeah, rich.
That sounds like a good word.
There's almost, is it fair to say there is some kind of almost a tobacco note or something? It's just me.
It could be, I don't know, maybe like a smokiness or something.
Yeah,
just like but like the pipe tobacco.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a great beer.
Really is, and it's got a bit of. And I always tend to think it sounds like a bad thing, but a bit of booziness. But you can sense the alcohol, but I guess it's from the barrels, not from. Like it was a home brewer tried to brew a terribly strong beer, and then it's hot alcohol from warm fermentation or something. It's like a barrel. There's that bit of whiskey heat.
Yeah, totally. I do get what you say, Anders, the heat, but I do not think it's boozy. I think that's the wrong word for me.
Yeah, but I didn't mean it in any negative way. No. But I was just searching for the right word. Yeah. But a kick of I think. Yeah, alcohol, not boozy, perhaps.
But I know what you mean. It's interesting from like a brewing process sort of perspective. You know, we do a lot of our really big beers actually at colder fermentation temperatures, exactly to do what you're saying, to sort of prevent the risk, to have a really like calm, controlled fermentation, to one, kind of make a cleaner flavor profile, but also to sort of avoid any risk of getting sort of too much booziness. Although I agree, or that word, or warmth, or whatever you want to call it. But I think a little bit of that is very nice. You just don't. It is nice, exactly. And if it's but too much you wouldn't want, I guess, right?
Yeah, but because I sometimes like it as well, and that's why perhaps I said boozy, because I like to. You can sense that it's barrel aged, that, and even sensing perhaps what alcohol used to be in the barrels.
Yeah.
So, Alex, did you drive to Thy to get the barrel, and then on the way you just picked all kinds of grains that you passed? Because I can see it says barley, rye, wheat, and oats. So that's all the grains
you just brought the malts from Thy, didn't you?
Yeah, that's basically right. And actually, that's a good question though. We do that. We use grew up. I'm saying that correctly. Malts for a lot of our beers. To be totally honest, I can't remember precisely if this was the case in this beer, but yeah, this is quite a complex, a fairly complex grain bill. Sometimes we go both ways on these, on big barley wines and on stouts. Sometimes totally on the simple end, sometimes the more complex end. But this was a lot of chocolate roasted. The wheat and the rye were both like chocolate roasted malts, and then the oats were just for a little bit of extra body. We often just throw those in to these kinds of recipes, right? But so the idea behind the grain bill was to really lean into the chocolate bit, and then beyond that, let the barrel do the work after that, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the flavors are coming from the barrel, and then you've got the sort of chocolate undertones, maybe a little bit of that licorice you were mentioning, those kinds of things also coming from the malts.
Yeah.
Is it a fresh barrel, this tree barrel, or has it been used before for beer?
This has been used once before, so this is second. So a lot of the barrels we're using typically, most often, I guess, 60-liter barrels. So pretty small relative to sort of the normal size, and then sometimes even smaller barrels. And then in this case, what you do is you get a lot more flavor in a relatively short period of time, I think, from smaller barrels. And then in this case, filling them twice, we typically maybe the second or the third time. The third time we'll probably do with a cider, right? So something that doesn't require as much input from the barrel. But so we actually tend to use the barrels to kind of downcycle them through our production for other purposes. So actually use them a couple of times, yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of a big beer. I think it was at 11% or something ABV. But when I look at the bottle, this quite small bottle, I get some I get some Placenti ølbrødre vibes or something. And that leads me to say, are collabs important for bicycle brewing? I know you do a lot of collabs.
Yeah, totally. We do a lot, and they totally are. I think they are from one, they're a lot of fun, right? And it's a good way to spend time with friends we don't always see as often as we'd like to, right? So that's one excuse for doing a collab. But I also think for us, for me, as from a brewing perspective, and for us as a business, they've been a huge part of like how we've evolved, right? Like people we've met and cool things we've done together have helped turn Bicycle like in slightly new directions, or caused us to like continue working with a beer style, especially, given the example you just had of Patrick and Plasanti and Ulbrolena, right? Working with them, the first beers we made with them were, a couple of years ago. And that kind of put me down a road, an increasing interest in some of these styles we first did together, and then doing some of our own versions as well. And that's super cool. And I think that's exactly what, collab should be between breweries, right? Is ways to inspire each other, ways to learn from each other, ways to hang out with each other, right? So kind of all three.
Yeah, I guess we had one of those collabs with Plasanti on the podcast before, and that episode that got kind of festive, where we drank that big can of Wrestling with a Giant.
Yes, that's right.
We had like 4 beers on that episode.
Well, I think go ahead.
But only in like 2 cans or something, honestly, a bottle and a can, because
didn't we collect an extra or 2?
Yeah,
I remember it's a really, really long episode.
Yeah, that's right. We had to find more beers.
Yeah, but I actually served one of Alex's collabs once.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
At a beer festival. It was, what was it called? It was the orangey Christmas stout you did with Amma.
Yes, that is totally right.
California Christmas, Yeah,
exactly.
It was actually fun because I went out. I never tried the chocolate orange thing before. And of all shops in Denmark, Normal, of course, had them. So I had to buy one to see. And it actually, I get the taste of the beer compared to the chocolate, but serving it, people said it's like that Danish grandma chocolate, the orange, what's it called? Orange stinger. Orange gren, yeah.
I heard people say that too. Yes, I think that was. I think most Danes didn't know the orange as such. It's a British chocolate, but it was popular in the U.S. So I actually just assumed it was American. To be totally honest, I didn't know really where it came from originally. But it was like this childhood Christmas thing, and I think so too. I think we truly, if you taste that chocolate or the oranges thing, also got that flavor kind of into the beer. But it was partly by using the technique of the beer. It was partly by using some of the ingredients that we researched or knew were actually used in the chocolate. So it's actually a kind of orange oil they use in the chocolate, and that's how they get that kind of vibrant orange taste, right? And so to replicate that taste, the idea was to use the same kinds of things. But that was super fun. And speaking of collabs, a totally different end of the spectrum with Amma Brookhus in terms of scale and size. But it was super fun with those guys. Big respect for them, and also super professional, bunch of guys and brewery, and that's also like a really impressive operation and brewery itself. So that was a lot of fun.
So are collabs, they are important to bicycle brewing, but are they important to the beer scene or the beer world as a whole? Is it important for beers in general that breweries do collabs?
I think so. I definitely think so. I think probably why breweries do them and what they get out of them probably it varies a little bit, right? I always kind of imagine maybe it's some like really big brewery scale. It might be a little bit more about marketing or like kind of say cross sales or something like this than anything else. I don't know, but certainly on the smaller scale, it seems in my experience and what I know from a lot of my friend brewers, I mean, it really is about like inspiring it, doing something new or doing something different. It's an excuse to do something different, right? Or try something a little more than you normally would, or And we've done collab. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, come on.
Oh, I was just going to say, even outside of breweries, we do all kinds of other unusual collabs. So from a local like business perspective, right? So we do. There's a really amazing ice cream, like Italian gelato place around the corner. Every summer, he makes ice creams using our beer as an ingredient. I mean, totally crazy. But the guy Yeba, I mean, he always put unusual ingredients in ice creams. So it seemed like a great idea, and there's some really cool results. Like think like an Imperial Stout chocolate sorbet. Super nice, except that it didn't get totally frozen because of all the alcohol in the beer. But really fun. And then we've got there's a really famous bakery down the street from us, and they've been using our or like a Copenhagen famous bakery, right? But they've been using our a beer of ours as an ingredient in their Roobrol for a couple of years now, and we've been like evolving that beer over time for them to sort of complement the flavors of the bread. And then for the first time ever, and then we released it on Friday, we actually did the reverse, or we actually they had some surplus Roobrol, and we used that as an ingredient. We substituted 8 kilos of grain for 8 kilos of Roobrol, and then made a Roobrol porter. And those are different kinds of things than brewery collaborations, right? But also kinds of ways of inspiring, right? And what's really fun, about the bakers, right? Juno, they're super like talented and geeky bakers, and talking to them and listening to them and how their interest and their scientific knowledge about making bread, and then standing in the brewery with them, right, and working on a beer, like that's a really fun way to get a different kind of input, right? So
I haven't tried to brew with the Roobrol. I have only tried to brew a Berliner Weisse with the sourdough to make it acidic, and it worked quite well. It was very complex. So
that's interesting. So this was the first time I'd ever done it, and that sounds like an interesting way to go. My experience, if you wanted to try it with the Roobrol, was really positive because ultimately, at least the Roobrol I was using, it's so like almost whole grain, like it's most of it's whole grains. So it actually substituted for malt immensely easily. And when I took the mash out at the end, you basically couldn't see the difference because I was scared you might get kind of like balls of dough or something in. There could be some risk of using bread, but it wasn't an issue at all.
Yeah. Sounds very interesting.
Yeah,
what would the name be of that beer? Sorry,
we called it Roobrol Porter, so not not super creative, but it tells you what it is, right?
Yeah.
I guess there's a trend these days with bread in beer. It's in the supermarkets now. Brøl.
Yeah.
And Jacobsen, and I know it's quite the opposite end of the scale of what you're doing, but is it Koberg, Schulstad, whatever it is, and Jacobsen and doing
Møn are also doing
Møn are doing something. So there's something about but I guess they're related. It's you're working with grain.
Totally right, and I guess using my understanding I met Simon from Brøl many years ago, but I guess there's a lot of surplus bread, so I guess it's also that's thrown out. So I guess that's also an argument for using it as a input into beer making. The only thing I noticed though with some of the beers I've tasted made from just commercial bread is then they can have odd like inputs from the bread, right? I think like maybe an unusual amount of saltiness, for example, would be one example, and then other things like that. So I guess, I mean, I don't know because I have no experience really doing that, but I guess the challenge must be like how you kind of manage that sort of stuff, right? How you manage and ending up with too much salt in your beer because it's coming from. So I guess that must be a little bit of a challenge.
Cheers. Skål.
Yeah, skål.
It really is an amazing beer.
Thank you, guys.
People should try your barrel-aged Imperial Stouts or barley wines because the ones I've tried, I've been happy every time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a really fun thing for us. Again, like I say, kind of inspired by some initial collabs, or inspired to continue with it, I should say. I mean, we had done a little bit of this previously, and now have quite a, like, in our tiny scale, quite a big barrel program. That's totally not the right word for it, but we do have. I think we probably have 15 small size barrels, and now we've been doing it long enough that it's kind of the exciting phase where a lot of things a lot of patience were required at first, right? But now, like on a steady flow basis, we're having things come out of these barrels. So I'm pretty excited. And it means that, like, yeah, we already have releases we'll have coming up to, like, leading up to MBCC, and then in the summertime, and then of course next year too. So we're planning already ahead for that, and that's
sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
Anders, do you have something for the barrels?
No, I just want to say, if this is the level of quality and taste, then I need to go. Next time I come to Copenhagen, I need to come by Østerbro, because it's not a neighborhood that you, unless you're going to watch a football game or something like that. Why? I hardly come there. We usually around Vesterbro and all the well-known, like Fermentoren and all that stuff in there. When you come from Jutland.
Yeah, totally. But I think you're not alone in Copenhagen. I think that's a general. You're totally right. I think Østerbro is not really a destination neighborhood, as you say, outside of, like, the stadium, right? But please do. You're always welcome, and we're hidden there. We're actually very close to Pagen, so we're just hidden down a little side street, and yeah.
It's Aalborg, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just talked to my wife earlier, and she said, "Who are you recording with? Is just Niels Kristian? Do I have a guest?" Say, "Yo, it's Alex, and he's from a small brewery, a brew pub in Østerbro." And she said, "We didn't go there last time we went to Copenhagen." Said, "No, it was Østerbro." Said, "Yeah, but we went all over the city." And said, "Yeah, but Østerbro, not really." but she said, no. then must go next time. So that's when the wife agrees, then it's possibly gonna happen.
I think we have a potential deal there, right? But you're welcome. Just write to me. We'll meet up.
Yeah,
I'll show you our barrel room.
Your barrel room.
I think I have to go to Copenhagen soon.
Yeah.
You have touched the future a bit, but how does the future look to Bicycle Brewing?
Well, I think one for now, I'll answer it in a second, but I guess to say first about the present, I think, we're very happy about where we are right now. I think, we have a great team, we have a great place, we have a great group of people that come to our place and are part of what we're doing, right? Both in the neighborhood and other things, and that's awesome, and I'm super happy about that, right? What comes in the future? I think we take it on the beer side. I think we take it slow because partly I am so happy with kind of what we have, and I think I think I'm proud to say I think we're making some good beers, and hopefully making some better and better beers, and I just want to keep doing that, focusing on that. I guess the question at the very beginning, right? Like wanting to make the best things we can do. I guess our focus for these last few years, right, is I think some breweries, for good reason, probably have focused on getting bigger, or maybe have measured success by being bigger, right, by the amount of beer they sell. And I think we've really just focused not on that at all, but just staying small, but just focusing on getting better. And I think that's really paying off. So I want to continue focusing on that. But then, yeah, what comes next? I would like us to grow beyond probably where we are, but I don't totally know which direction that will take. There's like probably 3 different paths it could be, right? It could be opening a larger brewery, just a brewery, standalone brewery somewhere. It could be opening a larger brew pub somewhere. It could be potentially making beers with a friend brewery, right? Doing some kind of contract brewing. And each of these options have different, benefits and drawbacks, right? The first couple have big capital, like big expenses associated with them, right? And so I don't totally know yet. And I think until I know the right way forward, I think we're just going to kind of stick with what we are. On the other hand, like I was telling you earlier, on the cider side, we were able to expand, and so we're doing that. We're producing a lot more cider. I think in sort of February, March now, we'll have packaged more cider in this like month than we did all of last year, and so it's like quite a big step up, and that means we actually have cider to sell. Like mostly speaking, with beer we were talking about, we barely have beer to sell in our own bars, much less too far away. But cider now for the first time we do. I mean, it's not huge volumes, but we have enough to sell to other stores, to other bars, and I'm pretty excited that the feedback's been really good. I think here in Copenhagen, there's bottles in probably 4 or 5 really good, nice craft beer bars, and we have it on draft in a couple of really nice craft beer places too, with great success. Like on draft, it's selling a keg a week at Pillars, and at now a couple kegs at Amma Brugghus in Bruggen, and so that's really positive. For feedback, I guess you could say, also by customers, right? Customers actually wanting it and drinking it. So that I think so. So anyways, I should answer the question properly, right? So I think, probably with the brewery, we're going to continue the way we are for some time, and maybe expand in somewhat in the future. And then I think on the cider, I think we're going to continue to expand and hopefully sell more in more places, so that you might see more widely. And we'll kind of do it like that, I think.
Yeah. Sounds like a very interesting future.
Exactly.
But what if Carlsberg calls you and say, we want to do a beer collab? Would you do it?
I don't know. You know what's really a funny story. Speaking of the devil, no, I don't mean it like that. Speaking of the sun, right? Whatever you say the dish. We got tapped into Carlsberg in the very early days for us. It was like our 2nd or 3rd year. I got contacted by somebody there from their research lab right here in Copenhagen, and they wanted to do some like test beer making experience for marketing and management staff. And so I actually hosted a bunch of Carlsberg people at the time. I don't really keep in touch with them now, but I got to meet a bunch of the people in the lab there, and them super nice people. But yeah, it was an unusual connection we had with Carlsberg in the early days. I even took the beer bike to the headquarters, and we served the test beers we made with them in the atrium, or the main room of the headquarters there. So I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to think about that, I suppose. But we do. I'd have to think about it.
We've been talking for almost an hour now, and now you said the beer bike. Tell us the name Bicycle Brewing. Why Bicycle Brewing?
Good question, and it's a little bit just I guess coincidence or luck, or just but we when we first were brewing beer during this phase I told you about, where it was kind of a side project. So we had the brewery up and running, but we weren't open to the public. So we were making beers, but didn't really have anything to do with them, because we weren't really selling them. We had some tastings and small events, but that was about it. But we were sitting one day in Fælleparken, near Parken, right, and drinking some of the first beers from this converted. I built a box with 2 taps to sit on the front of a short john bike, the small wheel in the front, normal wheel in the back, right? And we're sitting there drinking these beers, and we're kind of we're brainstorming, right? We're like, what should we call this business? And bike, beer, Copenhagen. Had to Google whether or not such a thing existed. It didn't yet, and so that was it. And I'm interested, I'm a biking enthusiast, so there's a little tie in there. But sometimes people ask me, if I was previously a cyclist or something like this. But it's nothing like that, nothing that obvious, right? It was just this fun idea that we had this bike bar, and then we doubled down on it and actually built a much nicer sort of custom bike that has a solar panel on the top, taps, a refrigerator, everything powered, through a battery, of course, but from the solar panel. So a really cool setup, and we use that for beer festivals that are in Copenhagen, so not Fanø, right? So someone asked me if I took the bike. Yeah, right. Oh, we actually got asked once to go to Malmö on the bike too, and then we had this whole joke that we should do some kind of social media thing of trying to get the bike on the train. Yeah, right. And so we didn't do that, but no. So it's good fun. And what's funny about that lucky coincidence, or that coincidence of that name, is it did tap us into. Obviously Denmark and Copenhagen has a really strong cycling culture, but also a lot of bike makers, manufacturers, builders, designers, mechanics, whatever, right? And it kind of tapped us into that world a little bit. And that's been really fun, because that's a pretty fun group of people to get to know. And then I guess the overlap between being enthusiastic about biking or bikes in general, and then beer, that's also a pretty strong correlation between those two, it seems. So, yeah.
I actually listened to the podcast all about beer the other day with Daniel True from Stepping Stone. He was doing, and they talked about how they met at Budapest Beer Week, and they just talked about how nerdy beer people are about not only beer but flavors in general, coffee maybe, or somebody about wine or anything else food related or drinking related. So makes sense that bike people, they are nerdy about bikes, so nerdy about beer. I could see that coming.
Totally. Well, I think that's really been fun for me over the years with this business. Speaking of collabs and different kinds of things, it's like one of the biggest things this business has done is giving me the opportunity to meet lots of interesting people doing cool things, and that is that's really cool. And like you say, like nerds in nerds in their own little realms, and it's so fun to meet someone who's like really into something. We actually did. There's no actual chocolate in the beer we're drinking, but we've made a couple of like chocolate stouts with cacao nibs. But relatively recently, or a little while back, we met a couple that has like a gourmet chocolate bar shop in Copenhagen, because they came into the bar with these exotic chocolate bars, and they sat down in the back room. I actually wasn't there, unfortunately, but she met one of our bartenders, and they sat in the back room, and they were pairing like our beers with their chocolates. And then they were like bringing samples to other people. Also, so Miko was working behind the bar to Miko, and they had this big conversation about it. And that became ultimately then, when they reached out to me, like the beginning of kind of a really cool friendship and ultimately a collaboration. So we recently made a double mash Imperial Stout with cacao nibs. They specially imported for us of 2 different varieties to make like an A and B version of a beer. And and that was just kind of a funny thing. And you should hear them talk. They're great, the 2 of them, but they're so into cacao and chocolate. Yeah, you can learn a lot, and it's pretty inspiring to hear someone excited about something like that, right?
But that's actually like when people feed Anders or me 5 cents, and then we just talk about beer, because that's our passion. Like you can tell a lot about your brewery and the cider making, but I think maybe that's what the beer world is about, or the beer industry in Denmark and all things related to the beer industry. That people are so willing to tell what they're doing and tell about all the great things they are doing. Also, the not so great things, because you don't hide all those things.
Yeah, totally. I think so too. I think it's really nice. I think there's really a lot of openness in sort of the beer culture and the brewing culture in Denmark, and maybe elsewhere too. But I think that's super nice.
I think we have to say skål one more time. Skål.
Skål.
Oh, I could have done the same glass as you, Alex. I just saw that you used the Faner Strong Beer Festival glass.
Yeah, it's it's a nice glass, right? I have it upstairs. Yeah.
I think we could call this segment now Hard Talk or something. Honestly says don't do all those questions, but I have some questions I like to ask when we have brewers. It's something about favorite beer styles and beers, and but maybe I would start asking you: do you have some kind of a favorite beer that's not your own?
That's a good question. I think for me, I speaking in the beginning about growing up on the west coast of the U.S., I think there were some initial beers I had over the handful of, or 10 years, or the first 10 years I was drinking beer, that had a big influence on me. And I don't know if that's the same exactly as the favorite beer I'd want to drink today, but I think it's relevant to the question, right? But I think having things like, for example, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I think some of the first IPAs I wanted to make were with Cascade, just like that beers, I think, right? And then having some beers, so sort of a good example of sort of early American kind of Pale Ale IPA. And then, what is it like, maybe Pliny the Elder, a classic first kind of example of a double West Coast IPA, right? These are beers that like sort of really hit me at the time, like influenced me as a beer drinker, and also as a beer brewer. And I think some of those are like have a special spot in my heart. Whether or not, maybe not the favorite beer I drink today, not a beer I drink every day today, right? But I think those are, those are pretty cool beers to look back on.
Yeah. Pliny is really a really great beer. I've been lucky enough to try it more than once. My wife's brother, he was living in San Francisco for 2 years at some point, and he brought some home because he knew I would want to drink them. He also liked them a lot. So
yeah. Awesome. No, it is totally. I used to live relatively close to. There was a really great beer bar on the Haight Street called Toronado. And they would have, Russian River beers quite a lot, and like release some of the beers there. They had like a connection with them, and so that was a great place to try some of these things, right?
Yeah. So is those West Coast or early IPAs, is that your favorite beer style, or what is your favorite beer style?
Probably, as a drinker these days, I probably most often drink, pilsners and maybe hazy IPAs, to be honest. And we also make a lot of hazy IPAs, and I really like that style. I like that style as a brewer. I like that style as a brewery. I think, hazy IPAs play to our strengths being small. Like there's a lot of disadvantages to being small, like mostly economic, I guess. But I think, for a beer style that is really best, as fresh as possible, one, and two, where we're willing to use like amounts of hops probably that somewhat larger breweries think twice about using. I think we can really shine in that category. And it also justifies, a lot of the hazy IPAs we make, we can, we're selling out of them in like a few weeks. So it kind of justify, and because they are so good when they're fresh, what I'm trying to say, is that it justifies all the extra work, right? To make 200 liters at a time is a ton of extra work, but it makes sense if you're making a beer style that really needs to be made every 2 or 3 weeks, right? Because you want everyone to be drinking it as fresh as possible. So that's like a good argument in my mind to focus on that kind of beer as a brewery, but then also as a beer drinker, I think it's obviously a very widely popular style, but also one I like. So
do you have a favorite hop combination for those hazy beers?
We've tried a lot of things over the years. We've been making now. Speaking of collaborations, earlier we've been making a beer with a hazy IPA with Pilles in Copenhagen. I think we made the first one just over a year ago, right? So we just had the sort of 1 year anniversary of the series of beers called Veltepilles. But that started out as a combination of Mosaic, Citra, and Nectaron. And I'm not the only brewer out there that's a fan of Nectaron, but I'm really a fan of Nectaron. I think that's a really nice. We get some really nice like stone fruit flavors out of that, and some really kind of nice flavors from that hop. And so we use that quite a bit in combination with others too. But those three were kind of a nice. Nice combination we've gone back to a couple times.
Sounds like a great combination. Anders and I, we just smiled because you said Citra and Mosaic, because that's we have named it cheat codes, because doing an IPA with Citra and Mosaic and then a third hop is like cheating, because it's always good.
Yeah, totally right. Yeah. It's hard to go wrong, right? Yeah.
You need to have some kind of special talent to make that be bad.
Totally. If you should point at one beer that you would wish that you were the brewer of, a beer that is already made, already out there, could you point at one beer or maybe a few where you would say, "Oh, I would have loved to be the inventor of that beer"?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't know if I can think of an individual beer, but now obviously talking about the hazy IPA, I think the breweries, sort of on the East Coast of the U.S. that sort of, what do you call it, launched or like developed that style. I think that is freaking brilliant, right? And speaking of this history that I had of growing up with the West Coast IPA, right? And the West Coast IPA just getting like more and more bitter. I feel like at some point, like it was getting really pretty bitter at some stage, right? And then I think the idea of taking that totally in the other direction, inventing a way to make like an extremely hoppy beer, like a process for making an extremely hoppy beer that wasn't bitter, I think was like a revolution. And obviously it was, right? Clearly you can see that by beer sales and the popularity of that style. And I'm not saying anything, new or unexpected, right? But that would have been a damn cool thing to have thought up. I did not think that up, though.
So something like Heady Topper or something,
for example, right? Yeah, that's right. But that wasn't. That wasn't quite that inventive, unfortunately, right?
What about if you should point at any brewery in the world, no borders or anything? What would be your dream collab?
Oh shit, that's a really interesting question. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's okay.
That might be too hard. I got to think. Come back to me. I pondered that one, but I mean, I never really have thought. I think of myself as so local. I guess I never opened up my mind to such a crazy idea. I kind of think about. I'm excited to be brewing with, I think, some very good breweries in Denmark, and that seems pretty awesome and special to me. I hadn't really even thought about the idea of like where would I go after that, right? I don't know. Maybe I take a pass on that one. Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
So you would go brewing with the Russian River or Sierra Nevada or something?
Oh yeah, maybe. Yeah. Who knows? if they'd invite me. Did Omnipolo do something with one of them at some point not that long ago? I want to say or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. They have done so many collabs.
Yeah, it's some big commercial breweries too, right? But yeah.
Anders, do you have any questions I haven't asked?
No, I don't think so.
Then maybe I think we have to say cheers one more time because it's really an amazing beer in the atmosfærisk.
Thank you.
Cool.
Cool. And then I normally ask the brewers if they have any final remarks they want to give us or something. If there is something we haven't touched and you want to say something, it's fair if you don't. But if there is something you feel like you want to say.
Let me think. I don't know. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff that, I love talking about, what we're doing, because obviously the one thing about being, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about being a small brewery or a small business, because I think about this a lot, right? So the one thing about being a small business is I work a lot, or it's a big part of my life, I guess you should say. Work is maybe not the right word because it's not clear exactly how you define that, because I love what I do, but I spend a lot of time doing this, and I guess what makes it ultimately worth it and rewarding is some of the things we've talked about tonight, right? It's like the people I've gotten to meet, the fact that there's like an audience that's enthusiastic about what we're doing, right? It's like that makes all that kind of hard work every day, making these especially small batches with the labor involved there. I was just at there was a big tap takeover at Pillas on Saturday, where it was a Pulpit Rock from the U.S. and Plaisante Street and Ulbrolene, and then also Why Not had a couple of beers there, and I had a couple of beers there, and it's like seeing the crowd that was there, stood in line to get some of these beers, and it's such a great atmosphere, and people are so interested and enthusiastic, and it's such a cool thing to see, right? And just to be a little part of that is a really fun thing, right? So even though we spent like all this time, sometimes I get lost in Østerbo in our little corner, right? Like laboring away, I feel. But then going out there to these kinds of things, you just sort of see, the culture around beer and the enthusiasm around it, and it really is. It's nice. It's really nice to be a part of that.
I actually think that's what craft beer is in Denmark. I think the festivals and the bars and all the events, it's always good times and happy people.
Totally right. Yeah. And you were saying earlier, you were talking about the Fanu Strong Beer Festival, but I had how that was a positive, complimenting the festival, but I had such a great time there. That's a good example to the things you said, right? It's such a cozy experience, right? It's such a nice location to have it, both the island and the brewery. And you couldn't ask for a better, nicer group of people. What a cool thing. Right. And we had it was also a good experience. We were there, like I said, kind of for the whole week. So we had this whole experience of sort of being there and having this cozy time and kind of being welcomed into this little community around the brewery, and super cool.
I actually think I saw you at the brewery Tuesday or something, but
that could be. That was the day I was there, so that totally could be. That was one of the days. Yeah.
We were just in there to have a beer.
Yeah, that's a good reason to be there.
Yeah.
That's pretty much why you go to a brewery, right? Okay, so I guess I want to say thank you, really, really thank you for telling us so many interesting things about cider and barrel-aged Imperial Stout, and all about the brewery and the bars or the tap rooms. I want to encourage people to go to visit your tap rooms in Copenhagen or Østerbro, just to have great beer.
Or to Pedersen here, so
Also, So we have this this IPA we do with them. It's not always there because we can't quite keep up, but typically, there's usually an IPA of ours there, and then maybe a couple weeks go by until the next version comes, right? But yes, thank you guys. It's been super cozy. It's a really nice way to spend a Wednesday evening. Should we cheers again?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
Skål.
Skål.
So, Anders, you're with us again. You have to say those final things you do. You can do it in Danish.
Så skal man huske at abonnere, man skal anmelde, man skal synes om, man skal give tommelfinger op, man skal sende mail, spørgsmål, fanmail, kommentere under vores SoMe-opslag, alle de der ting. Ja. Har jeg glemt noget?
Jeg tror, du var det hele med. Du var ikke nogen rusten af at være væk i et par måneder.
Nej, det er utroligt.
Ja. Skal vi så ikke bare sige, Anders, at det her, det var...
atmosfæriske øl om cyklende øl.
Ja, eller bare ormøl.
Noget af den stil.
Det kører bare derudad med cykeløl.
Yep.